thinking about where to begin this, and I was thinking about when I first heard of you, and I think I first heard of you. I was sharing a flat with a director called Robert Hastie, who is the artistic director of Sheffield Theatres now. And Rob was training then as an actor at RADA. And I said to Rob, I was starting my career as a director, come on, who's good in RADA? Like, who do you think's great? And who's going to be, you know, the best actors from your year and the above? And he said, well, there's this guy called Tom Hiddleston, right? And the thing about him is that he comes in before everybody else of the working day at RADA, and it's a pretty punishing drama school, I think it's got, you know, it's a hard, tough training mob, we can talk about that. And he comes in and he warms up properly, and then he stays behind after everybody else, and is the last person to leave. And not only is he incredibly talented, but he's incredibly hardworking. And I was like, wow, he sounds really great. We should definitely check him out. But I was wondering, I think there's a sort of question I always have for actors, which is what they take with them from their training and their practice into their life. And I know that you're an athlete, weren't you, as well? I mean, you are someone who is very physically... That's very generous. You're always running. Basically, okay, whenever I call you, you're always running. But yeah. Did you, when you went to drama school, did you think, okay, this is an athletic exercise as well as an intellectual one? Or what, you know, you'd already been to Cambridge, right? Yeah. And what did you read there? Classics. Yeah. So what made you think, right, what I want to do is go and do 3 years conservatoire training? Was it something you needed for your body, your mind? What was it? Well, I'd always imagined, and I hope I was correct, that acting is it requires a total commitment of head, heart, and body, and that the art, if it is one, perhaps it's a craft, but if there's an art to acting, it's inhabiting characters fully, not. So it begins with an act of empathy or understanding, and then your body has to follow. And so the actors I'd always admired on stage and on screen had always had a great connection to their instinct, enormous emotional range and vulnerability, but you could always feel that they were real. There was something tangible about them physically. And I knew I was 21 when I arrived, and I knew that I'd had this extraordinary and very fortunate academic training at Cambridge, learning how to read, learning how to think to some extent, to be rigorous and to investigate ideas, to turn them over, not to leave a stone unturned, to keep investigating, keep searching, stay curious. But the thing I didn't have, and I knew I needed, was the discipline to, for example, play a big part like Coriolanus or any of those big Shakespearean roles for the length of a 12-week run, night after night, and not physically break down, because those parts require this extraordinary physical commitment. So, and I thought, I looked at RADA and I thought, well, a couple of interesting people have been through those doors, They must know something. Yeah. And so in a way, that's very funny of Rob that he remembers the early starts and the late finishes. It just sounds like I've got terrible timekeeping. Just need to manage my time better. But part of that was about wanting to soak up the experience. I knew it was a unique and privileged experience. I was very lucky to get in, and I wanted to make the best of it. What was the best bit? I think it's being not just encouraged, but sort of thrown out of my comfort zone. Doing things that I was afraid of, doing things I had never done before. The training when I was total. So it was a Stanislavski-based training, learning the basics of the system, as he called it, grounding a performance in naturalistic truth, which is all about detail, really, because we're trying to boil it down. As an actor, you're trying to represent and investigate human reality. which is to say that the characters you play, you want them to be three-dimensional, you want them to feel real, you want them to be vulnerable and flawed and courageous, and they make mistakes, and you just want... But that's the thing we share. That's the thing. That's why we go to the theatre. That's why we go to the cinema, because we need to connect with each other. And so you go and see a great film, you go and see a great play, and we all leave with a shared understanding of something we know to be true about life, whatever it is. And so the requirement of the actor is to be as honest and authentic and truthful as possible.
And RADA taught you that, or how to do that?
I think there was, I remember an extraordinary emphasis on truthfulness.
And would they do that thing that they do where they go, not true, not good? I've just worked with some actors who went through Royal Scottish, and they said we were taught by Russians, and we'd do something, they'd just go, I don't believe you.
Yeah. By the way,
they do that?
I mean, people still say that. I had a...
do you say that in your own head?
Well, sometimes I do. Yeah, I have a pretty rough critic who sits on my shoulder and tells me it's not good enough. But there's a tremendous acting teacher who is still at RADA, and I will give him a shout out. His name's John Beskitzer, and he was my sort of first teacher, my first 2 terms at RADA. And he would never say it. It would never be harsh. It would never be personal or critical, but you would do a scene or do an exercise, and he would say, I didn't believe it. Do you believe it? And you go, no, I didn't really. And he might say it was very impressive, and it was very skillful, and it was very courageous. So, you're doing a lot, but it didn't feel real. So let's think about why it didn't feel real. Why wasn't it honest? Maybe the truth of that moment is more mundane than you're making it. You're making it bigger, more theatrical, more operatic than it needs to be. Or maybe it's bigger, and maybe you need to just investigate how that emotion that this character is going through feels in yourself, and risk it, and know that you'll be caught. But flash forward to the spring of 2015, filming The Night Manager in Morocco, and Susanna Bier, who I love dearly, is not shy of saying after a take, I don't believe it. Do it again, more real, more true.
I met her the other week. She is ferocious.
Yeah,
actually, she made this great speech. She was talking about women in film, and she said, what we need to be is more truthful. Yeah. Like we need to tell a better truth about women's lives.
I've always found that an interesting paradox about acting, is that by and large, the sort of commonly held belief is that actors are pretending, that they're creating, we are in a way, that you're creating an illusion, but the greatest compliment you can pay an actor is that their performance was truthful. Yeah. You believed it. You recognized. Maybe you're watching actors go through, I'm just trying to invent scenarios, familial struggle, fathers and sons arguing, a marital breakdown, a relationship falling apart, somebody grieving, all these things that we all go through in life. These are all scenarios we find ourselves in. And I don't have to tell you, when you're watching something and it connects to you. You think, oh, I know how that feels. That character on stage, I don't know that actor, never met them in my life. But the thing they're representing, the shape of human nature that they're inhabiting is something I know is real. That's what it's like to grieve. That's what it's like to break up with someone. That's what it's like to have a fight with your father or have a fight with your son. And so this strange thing about truth, I suppose. And John Beskitzer, the same acting teacher, used to say, acting is being truthful in imaginary circumstances. Yeah.
I often think it's actually the bit of thing that needs making up in theatre is often by the audience.
Yes.
Like I've just done this production of a Shakespeare play with almost no set, no props, and I found myself saying to these actors, there's a prison scene in it, and it's the Donmar, so you can't fly on a prison, people are on 3 sides. I found myself saying to them, I am so sorry, you are going to have to act an imaginary door. Do you know what I mean? And like, we're going to have to agree where the door is. You're going to have to come in through that gap. Well, we've gone, there's the door.
Yes.
And I am now that person standing in a rehearsal room saying, will you pretend there's a door there?
Yeah.
And actually, everyone's fine with it.
Totally, yeah.
And it feels kind of rubbish in a rehearsal room because it's hilarious and embarrassing. But as soon as there's an audience there, the 250 people in that auditorium are putting that door there.
Yeah, they believe in the door.
Yeah.
Well, it's become something that's sort of at the center of the way that's the thing, it's become a part of my instinct, is you commit to the illusion of the imaginary circumstance. And that's been true of everything I've done. As you know, I am not an ancient Roman soldier.
In some respects.
But when we did Coriolanus, you have to commit to the illusion that I am.
Yes, and it was 14 chairs and a ladder, that production.
And I'm not climbing a ladder into the roof of the Donmar, I'm climbing a ladder into the walls of the city of Coriolis, this ancient Volscian town. I'm not on a backlot in a studio in Albuquerque in New Mexico surrounded by green screen. I am hurtling through space and time in the Bifrost on my way to see Thor.
I actually think, I just made a movie for the first time, and I actually think actors have to do more pretending.
More imagining.
Yeah, in film than they do in theatre.
Well, I suppose it became people used to say to me when I first made the first Thor film, in moments on the set where they're reorganizing the lights or something, they'd say, "Is this weird? Is this hard for you?" And I say, "Well, it's just like being on stage." And I suppose my early experience after RADA was in the theatre, of constantly fueling a tank of imagination and trying to be truthful within it, whether it was being in Othello at the Donmar or Ivanov, and forgetting for that moment that you're not in a theatre in Leicester Square in London in 2008, you're in Russia. And, the commitment is I'm in Russia, I'm a doctor, I've got to look after Ivanov's wife, she's dying of tuberculosis, Ivanov isn't taking this seriously, I need to go and tell him. And on I go.
Yeah.
And Ken Branagh and I are having an ideological battle about why he's not looking after his dying wife.
Yeah.
Gina McKee, playing Anna Petrovna, is not dying. Ken Branagh and Gina McKee are not married. I'm certainly not a doctor. But in that scenario, we all are committing to this game, I suppose. And it is a game in one way. But it goes back to this thing that my acting teacher said, John Beschitzer, being truthful in imaginary circumstances. I am, and sometimes it does make you laugh when you're being so truthful that people believe you. I was talking about The Night Manager again. We were shooting the first episode and the 6th episode of that series concurrently because they both take place in the story. It's the Nefertiti Hotel in Cairo, in Egypt. And I spent a lot of time, we shot in a real hotel in Marrakesh. I spent a lot of time behind the actual reception desk of this hotel, this lovely hotel in Marrakesh. And we were doing nights, and we were doing a whole bunch of scenes where I'm organizing keys or checking reservations or doing lots of hotel managing paraphernalia.
Do you think you could now do that? Like, if it all fell away, you're like, do you know what? I've got a career.
Well, what was so
that
funny
or
was that
which would you do?
on that evening we were filming from 8 p.m. to 2 a.m. or something, and we were just doing all the stuff behind the desk. And some guests at the hotel came back from dinner, didn't see the cameras, and they came in and said, "Yes, room 303, please." And I said, "Certainly, sir." So, there we go. So they believed me. The circumstances were not imaginary for them; they were very real. But yes, and then in the same series, there's a sequence in episode 5 where Jonathan Pine is demonstrating to some potential buyers the kind of firepower of the weaponry that Richard Roper, played by Hugh Laurie, is selling. And we're all sitting on the crest of a hill, and in the distance, in the neighboring valley, there's an extraordinary display of firepower. And on the night we were filming, there were no gun was fired. There were no rockets. There were no airplanes. There were no drones. We were staring into a dark, deserted valley with one or two geckos in it. And the explosions were just lights on our faces. And we were all having to make sure that we were looking at the same part of the sky. Like, so you see that star, Hugh, Al Petrie, you see that star, the red one? Let's pretend that's the airplane. And then when it gets to the plow, we'll just all follow our eyes across to the plow. And then there'll be an explosion. Everyone good with that? Okay, let's go. Again, being truthful in imaginary circumstances. So yeah.
So the thing that I found really astonishing when I was shooting this film was the amount of distraction that you have to zone out.
Yeah.
And I think that's partly about kind of let me kick in my imagination. But the thing that I found really surprising is that, so in theatre, it's an obvious thing to say, but everyone's there all the time.
Yes.
Right? So you turn up, you warm up together. You know, I wanted to pop in and see the company at the Donmar yesterday. I knew they'd all be in the auditorium at 6:30, you know, stretching their hamstrings and warming up their voices. And the thing that I found initially quite distressing about a film set is that you're distant from the actors and you're fragmented from them. But then I got completely obsessed with a thing that I had never been able to see before, really, as a director. And this felt very privileged. This is kind of weird, but you're never there the moment just before someone walks on stage. So
yes.
I'm there like at all parts of your process. Like
Yeah.
I'm backstage, you know, I might pop back when you kind of, you know, getting ready to go on at the half, as we call it, like 35 minutes before the show starts, go everything okay. But I had never seen that moment just before someone stepped in the wing onto the stage, because I'm in the audience then, or there's a privacy to that, actually.
Yeah.
And the thing that I found really remarkable was, for the first time, getting to see actors just before they did a take. Like just within that moment when they have to clear their head and focus that thing. And I thought it was tremendously hard in a film set, because actually I'm very privileged because I'm looking at you, I'm looking at the monitor. You're looking at all the crap coming in the other direction.
Yeah.
You know, like just like, and it's, I don't just mean like cameras and people, I mean like they just go, just chuck that bit of cable over there, it'll be fine.
Yeah.
You know, it's not the kind of purity of an auditorium like this. And it seems to me that the ones who were very, very, very good at it, I mean, everyone's great in this movie, but the ones who are amazing at it, for them it was like a kind of moment of meditation. You know, there was a sort of, it was almost like the closest thing, this is going to sound a little pretentious, but, you know, it's like a kind of moment of prayer or something. It's got that kind of internal privacy to it. And what I'm dying to ask an actor is, before you go on camera and do your take, is that the same feeling as before you go on stage and pretend
sure.
that is it the same thing, or does it require a different?
I'm sure it is. No, sorry, that's not meant to be mysterious. I was just thinking about it. The interesting thing for me, well, it's a really lovely observation you've made, actually, Josie, because the reason I still find acting fascinating is that I've demanded of myself, and I also demand it, I think, of other actors, and it's really a gift that's been passed to me by people who've inspired me, is that we all, I mean, we don't have time, but we could go around this room and I could ask you to name a performance that you feel you've never forgotten and you found almost unbearably moving. It just spoke to you. It seemed to explain yourself back to your own soul. And I've had those moments periodically in my life, watching other actors. And I think it's the gift of that preparatory moment, I suppose, is you're preparing to give a part of yourself that's a very private part of yourself, that is something really in the interior of your soul, to give flesh and breath to this fictional person, because it's the right part of you that fits him or her for that moment. And that's, I think, what I find I still find it very humbling when I'm in the presence of great acting, because it's such a generous thing. I find the actors are lending their souls to this story to create an experience of meaning for all of us, and that happens at the beginning. That happens in theatre and it happens in film. That probably sounds really over-intellectual and slightly incomprehensible. But what am I saying?
So okay, but that's okay. So that's interesting.
But the theatre film thing is interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so, no, it's good. Just come back. No, because that's actually similar to a point that you're making. And what's interesting to me is that what you're talking about really is what you give, and the sense of gift, and also the sense of discovery.
Exactly.
And
yeah.
I think when people start, because you're quite grown up now, so am I. When people start, actually they don't have that relationship to it.
Yeah.
Like, when you see a young actor bounce into a rehearsal room, it's not that they're not serious, but actually there's sort of a quality of life and surprise and where am I I think it takes quite a long time to get rid of that and actually realise what the transaction is.
Yeah.
And I think for me you're at an interesting point, which is about going, look, you can kind of pretty much do anything now. I'm not saying there are parts that you want that you don't get, but if you were like, I'd quite like to do one of these, I'd quite like to do a King Lear, saying that, but you'd be allowed to do that. Like, someone would let you do that.
Maybe not yet.
Maybe not yet. Well, I don't know. Look, it would book. Do you know what I mean? I went, right, we're going to do King Lear. Yeah, is everyone there next Tuesday? I think pretty much everyone would come. But
There's some grey in this beard, I'm telling you.
There is. So I suppose the question that part of, for me, the quality of maturing as an artist is working out not just what bit of yourself you're giving, but also what you're doing.
Yeah.
Like what the meaning attached to that thing is.
But I recognised it as a young person, though. I think when I was about 14, 15, 16, that was when I really got, I loved doing voices and making people laugh when I was a child, but I got taken to the National Theatre a lot when I was in my teens, and also I got exposed to a different sort of filmmaking, different stories. And I remember, and I've told this story before, but I remember going to see Richard Eyre's production of John Gabriel Borkman at the National Theatre, starring Paul Schofield in his last performance, Vanessa Redgrave and Eileen Atkins, this great, towering Scandinavian play about a family in pain. And there were all sorts of things about my own experience and my own life that I didn't fully understand, and I certainly didn't have the language to articulate. But I felt it in Paul Schofield, and I felt him articulate it on behalf of the entire Littleton Theatre. And that's when I understood the power of acting. I thought the theatre was this sort of ceremonial thing where people did lots of air kissing and had a gin and tonic in the interval.
But your mum was in theatre for a bit, wasn't she?
Yes, she was, yeah. But I had never been sort of, hit between the eyes like that before. And I realised that the profundity of all these strangers arriving and sitting in a dark room, and after 2 hours the lights come up and everybody is crying. But none of us know each other, because Paul Schofield has done something vital and honest and expressed something about being alive that we all understood. And I thought, wow, that would be something to do with my life. What if I could? Maybe a sort of an unrealizable dream at that point. But then also in film, Jack Nicholson in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, Timothy Spall in Secrets and Lies, that last scene, I don't know how many of you have seen it, Mike Leigh's film, when he's so quiet all the way through and he's just containing everybody else's pain, and just it's sort of being, he's absorbing it and managing, and then he just says we're all in pain, and he kind of breaks and he expresses something honest about, I don't know, and it's very powerful and profound. So even though I perhaps didn't understand how to articulate any of that or how to access it maybe myself, I still understood what it was.
So what I'm getting at, I think, a bit is what now you are established and celebrated, how do you now make your choices? Like, what is the responsibility you think you have to going, it's that project, not that project?
It's an interesting question. I feel I respond to material in a very instinctive way. because I'm still excited by the challenge of what the story or the piece of work or the writing represents. And I think the great privilege of being an actor is that you're often called upon to represent scenarios and behavior that you actually have no experience of. And you have to then fill out what limited experience you have with your imagination, with your research, and then expand. And so it's almost like a kind of a spiritual journey of expansion. When we did Coriolanus together, I think there were things in playing that part I'd never fully understood, but I knew in order for Shakespeare's play to really sing, I had to dig quite deep and expand into it.
Yeah.
And then I finished the run of that production and I retained the expansion. And that's the gift of the job for me, as I've investigated something I didn't perhaps know before. And
I think that's extraordinarily true of that play because, I'm not saying it's time, but for me that's, in as much as we know anything about Shakespeare, we know that was toward the end of his career. So that is an older man writing a younger man. So I think that expansion that you articulate is partly connected to that there are not necessarily, I'm not saying that Coriolanus is, Caius Marcius is, he's called, thoughts are immature, but there is a sort of playwright's eye on youth, I think, as he writes that character.
Yeah.
You know, it's someone looking at a young man and understanding something about a young man as an old man.
Yes.
That's there.
The intransigence of it.
I think so.
The obstinacy of it.
Yeah, I mean, I always thought my experience of it is that I think when he wrote it, Shakespeare must have been phenomenally cross.
Yes, yeah.
Like just really cross. It's trying to say it's someone who just spent their whole career with people going, do you know what'd be really good if we had one of those? Wouldn't a scene about that be great? Are you sure about that bit? It's just like,
Yeah. Angry character. But that's what I love about. It's worth having a little mention of Shakespeare, because in my experience, there's no other writer as an actor that demands so much, and the privilege and challenge of performing Shakespeare is having to align one's mind with his. And the profundity and breadth of his mind, the things he was able to understand, the sheer breadth of it, requires you to think about life in a very profound way. And it doesn't have to be heavy. You know, his comedies can be and are hilarious.
Have you done a comedy?
Yeah, I've done the old comedy. I haven't done I don't know if I've done a professional production of a comedy.
What was your unprofessional Shakespearean comedy?
Have I even done an unprofessional one?
Done Much Ado?
I've not yet done Much Ado, no. I remember thinking when I was doing The Hollow Crown how there's comedy in that early part of Henry IV, part one.
That's haven't seen
Prince
it.
Hal, Falstaff,
Yeah.
Poins, Mistress Quickly, all of that it is a kind of show. And that there has to be a levity to it.
They're very, very funny, those Tavern scenes, I think.
But like, the line between comedy and tragedy is very thin. And so you're still investigating the same things. You're still investigating, the truth of it, I suppose. But the demand of Shakespeare, if you're going to do it well, is that you have to try and hone the technicality of delivering the verse and the words and making sure they can be clearly heard and understood. But also, so there's an intellectual demand there, and to honour the poet, a physical one to honour the character, and then a kind of spiritual one to honour the profundity of some of the things that he's saying. And every time I've done a big Shakespearean part, I've always found it incredibly. There's a sort of, how best to put this? There's an extra dimension and clarity to my life at that time. Yeah. That somehow I've got this, I'm carrying around, I've sort of synchronized watches with Shakespeare's mind. And the ask is that you go as deeply as you can into the things you're investigating. With Coriolanus, the corrosive power of rage.
Yeah.
The rage of that man, the destruction that his rage wreaks on his family, his friends, those he loves, on the city of Rome. That actually this rage was once a useful thing that propelled him into war, made him a war machine, a fearless soldier and a hero, but given full vent, it only destroys, it doesn't build. And having to even feel that in myself was a profound experience. With Hamlet, the depth of his grief, and then the conversion of his grief into grievance, and how the compression of his grief and the fact that his grief was somehow forbidden and curtailed is what turns that mourning or that lack of mourning into grievance. And it shows, I think, of all Shakespeare's plays, that the utility of retaliation and grievance. Hamlet has all this grievance. I must avenge my father, kill my uncle. And he's angry with everybody. He can't see the wood for the trees. And it only brings him ruin. But he was never allowed to let it go. And to investigate that, and of course Hamlet is about so much more than that. It's about the value of being alive. And you have this young man who has lost his connection to the meaning of being alive and having to inhabit that. What does it mean to feel that the argument for being has lost? That there is a question of to be or not to be. That maybe not to be is a better idea. Of course, no. The answer is to be, profoundly to be, but to be on the side of life. To be. But he's at that moment where he's staring into the abyss going, well, maybe it's not so great, life, actually. And to go down there and investigate what that feels like and give that shape. Of course, I'm even in trying to explain the experience of playing these parts, I'm somehow reducing it or confining it. They live on. They live.
But that's the scary thing, isn't it? You go, okay, here's one of the greatest things ever written.
Yeah.
We're going to have a go.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the sort of the mindset you have to get yourself into to get into a rehearsal room with a Shakespeare play. Like you feel the gift of it or the privilege of it, but you also go, this is really, really scary. Like, and as a director, you're like, how do I make people not frightened of this?
Well, I wanted to ask you about that because I think on Coriolanus, in a way, I say we were having to synchronize watches with that play, and it's a very demanding play, and you're responsible for. I don't know how many people in here saw Coriolanus or anybody watching it in wherever they're watching it.
They keep doing NT Lives, actually. I've managed to buy a dinner service. So if the one of the royalty, if one comes up again, do go, because I need a few more side plates.
But, this play has to speak to, because it's Shakespeare, it works on so many levels. Yes, it's about the power of anger and pride in the figure of the leading character, and family, sons and mothers, but it's also deeply about politics.
Yeah.
And how the state and the individual relate, how we relate to ourselves as a body politic. The common people want to be heard. They feel they're not being heard. They feel they are being lied to and being mistreated by the Senate, this patrician class.
Yeah.
And I remember, but how do you take? Because you're having to do the same psychological work. How do you take that on as you approach doing Shakespeare, doing Measure for Measure, now playing at the Donmar Warehouse, Hie thee hence, or Much Ado, which you did with David Tennant and Catherine Tate, or Coriolanus. How do you run up to doing a Shakespeare production?
I have, a bit like you, I think, a very obsessive method of preparation. Because you turn up with it learned, which is not what all actors do, and not everybody likes to do that. But I always think that the way you work, you're sort of making the folds in the paper aeroplane. It has that kind of feeling to it. In fact, I was thinking of it. I got my dad a magnificent book on making paper aeroplanes. for a birthday present. It's brilliant. Go online and get it. There's like a video and there's a guy. It's great. Because I thought you just like fold it and do anything you do. No, you can do all sorts of amazing things. And I was thinking of you as I was looking at this book, actually, just thinking there's a care to the calibration of it. And then you can let it fly. And I think as a director, the calibration is incredibly important. So I'm quite nerdy with it. So I spend a lot of time looking at the folio, if that exists in the play, where it was first printed, comparing the punctuation of different editors, because any punctuation that you read in a modern edition of a Shakespeare play is an editor's choice, because how punctuation works has changed, and also it's not consistent. So, and as you know, in Shakespeare, actually, in all theatre, breath is thought. So where you breathe almost tells you everything you need to know about what the meaning and the weight of the line is, because like great singers, the amount of breath you take and the way you release it releases meaning and phrasing and all of those things. So where the punctuation goes is really important. And one of the things about this production of Measure for Measure I've done, which is sort of kind of a bit mad, but in a cool way, is that we do the play twice.
Yeah.
So, and it's amazing because in the first half, these actors are doing this rather perfect classical reading of the play. Yeah. You were talking about naturalism before, and then in the second iteration of the play, they're playing it very naturalistically. So, the difference between one of them saying in the first half, someone's leaving in a hurry, may we bring you something on the way, and may we bring you something on the way. Like that, just...
Yeah.
And they mean two completely different things, and audiences laugh when they hear it a second time slightly differently. So the sophistication of listening around it is really important. So I did this big nerdy prep where I make sure that I know it backwards. And then I cut it very, very carefully. I should be given some kind of large award, I think, for cutting probably 90 minutes from Coriolanus.
Yes. True.
Really, that's what I deserve all the credit and more side plates for, is that work. And because I've got great respect for people who do them uncut, but I think you probably need to take some stuff out of them. So, and that is part of the preparation as well. And then you distill and distill. So with our production of Coriolanus, it was working out how you did ancient Rome, the Battle of Coriolis, all those things with 14 chairs and a ladder. And that has to be arrived at through distilling and distilling, I think. So getting to kind of pure essence of it. So you're very confident, because you need to be confident, because actors are going, where do I stand? What does this mean? I've never done a Shakespeare play before, not you, but a lot of people. Or am I as good as the 18,000 people who've played Coriolanus before me? So you soak in. But your responsibility is to soak in a lot of anxiety.
Yeah.
To make that
yours
space
too.
playful.
No, that's your job for sure.
Yeah.
But I remember there was a very specific note you gave me in previews or in running up to dress rehearsals, and actually I think it was in the dress. Just before the opening of a play, I'm sure many of you know, but you run the thing through. You just keep running it, iron out the creases, get used to the automatic. Hang on, where's my prop? I need my sword, which I've got lost. Got lost going to stage left. You get all that out of the system. But I remember after a dress, we sort of stayed back late, and he said, "Can I just say something?" And I said, "Sure, say whatever." And he said, "I really think you need to get angrier." And it was your perspective on the play. Like, in order for the profundity of Shakespeare's thought, as held and contained in the structure of that play, to be truly brought alive, I needed to commit more of myself to make it live. And that's the director's responsibility, is to be able to say to actors, actually, this is what I need. We're instruments, and you're essentially the conductor of the orchestra.
I'm never sure about that.
No?
I just think that's a bit... I think there's a thing about the character of the director, isn't there, as a kind of megalomaniac auteur. Like, one of my experiences of making a film...
But your responsibility is the story, no?
Yes. But it's also my responsibility to find out how you tick. So to look into your craft and your essence and the friction between that and the part that you're playing, and how that works with everyone else in the room, what the chemistry of that is, and bring a thing together that would be different if one person was different in one tiny part. Like, I really believe in that. I really believe it's about my attentiveness to the opportunity of what everybody has, as much about going, this is my vision of Coriolanus. Because it can't be one size fits all, because then the work's no good. You know, I hate doing stuff. I've transferred shows to Broadway. It was a disaster because I was doing it with different people and it was awful and I kind of couldn't get one thing out of my head and they felt, you know, it was bad. Like I did
Two
bad
different
work.
paper airplanes.
Yeah.
What do you do?
And I was like, oh,
yeah. By the way, the paper airplane thing is amazing. I'm stealing it.
But,
and that's what it is. It's what it
yeah.
is. And on set, the thing that you noticed about, you know, in a way, before a take, you're concentrating on one tiny fold, thinking, what does this scene right now require from me?
Yeah.
And I've had that. I've had that where I've thought, you know, whether it's playing Loki or playing the Night Manager or playing Prince Hal or Henry V or anything, you know, when you're filming, especially they're quite complex characters, you might be in a moment where one of those characters, actually it applies to all of them, is incredibly charming, walks into a room and is just blazing, radiant energy, vitality, charm. And you think, I need to be in a place where I'm feeling quite playful now. You know, Loki's about to play a trick, or Jonathan Pine has to settle everybody down, and you know, and then you think, right, I need to sort of get myself in a place where that's what I'm going to give in this scene. Or you have a thing where one of those characters is isolated on their own, very private, having a breakdown, and you think, I need to just quietly fold that corner of the paper airplane and find the part of myself that will now have a breakdown on behalf of.
Yeah, okay, so that's great. So I think it's my job to be able to watch you carefully enough and understand what you're doing that I can tell what you're doing, so that you can get the room to do it. And that's so true on film. There's a bit in this movie I've done where.
Can I just stop for 1 second? This movie, which has been elliptically referred to all night, is Mary, Queen of Scots.
Sorry, can I just... What I'd quite like to do is record that on my phone so I can make that gasp my text message alert. That would be so good. If we could just do that then, that would be great.
I feel very lucky. I've had an exclusive private screening of the finished cut. It's absolutely breathtaking. January, it's coming out in January.
Yeah, January here, yeah.
Saoirse Ronan,
Margot
Robbie,
Jack Loudon, David Tennant, Simon Russell Beale reads Death Warrant for me.
Yeah.
Very lucky. Great Gemma Chan is amazing, and Adrian Lester.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
It's really I found it emotionally overwhelming in a way I didn't expect.
But it is, and it's quite. I was going to say it's quite. You know, it's Mary Queen of Scots, so like not great stuff happens to her. So there aren't.
Spoiler.
That's actually the tagline. But and there aren't many jokes in it. And there was this is how I'm learning to be a film director. Okay, and Jack Loudon, who's in Measure for Measure as well at the moment. There's a moment in the film he's playing Lord Darnley where he's hit in the head by a door. And it's about the only decent, solid laugh in the film, right? Not because we've messed up other gags, but because there aren't many laughs. And it's very simple, like character comes through door. So you need 3 takes of that? And I can see, without me talking to Jack, and without Jack talking to me, I can see what Jack is doing. I can see that what Jack is doing is gradually edging himself toward the door so that when the other actor opens it, it will hit him in the head. And I can't ask Jack Loudon to be hit in the head with a door. Jack Loudon can't tell me that he's going to be hit in the head with a door, otherwise the first assistant director will close it down because on the whole you're not meant to bang actors in the head with doors. But I know that he wants to do it. So I'm there going, my first is going, you got it? Because we'd open the door now, I'm like, I need one more. He goes like, have you got it? I go, no, I need one more. Have you got it? It's like, 8 take, boom, like that. We go, thank you very much. So that's in the can, and Jack's like, high five.
Yeah, great.
It's just really, yeah. But it's like understanding just quietly what's going on.
Yeah.
I
remember when Jeremy Irons slapped me across the face in The Hollow Crown, trying not to prepare myself for it. Because I knew it was coming. I, Tom, knew it was coming. But Prince Hal has to be like,
unthink that,
it's a complete surprise. Whack.
Yeah, I rewatched a clip of that the other day. It's really good. It's a really good stuff, actually. Yeah.
But I knew it was going to work. So it's like afterwards, it's like, that was great, Jeremy. Well done. Anyway, Mary Queen of Scots, January in the UK, is that right?
January in the UK, I think December in America. So I'm about to go and do all of that publicity.
It's so touching. It could only have been made by Josie.
Oh.
No, I really think so. And it's I think we tell stories from the past to understand something about our present. And that's why we always do these Shakespeare plays. That's why we keep remaking Dickens and Jane Austen and other historical drama. I think we keep trying to dig around and trying to understand ourselves. So why Mary Queen of Scots? Why now? And I won't spoil it, but I do think there are some answers. Like, why do you tell that story now? Is the story of two very isolated women with a lot of responsibility on their shoulders, political disharmony, warring factions, meddling men.
Cost of power. It's about the cost of power.
The cost of power. Uneasy lies the head that wears a crown.
Very Shakespearean.
Yeah.
So I just wanted, we'll try it open a sec. I just want to talk to you about your life beyond acting, really, because we're here. Well, you asked me to come here because this is to support BAFTA.
Yes,
this
it
evening.
is.
And you're an ambassador for BAFTA. I remember going to a dinner where everyone's like, he's an ambassador. That was great.
Yeah. See, whenever anyone says ambassador, it just
Ferrero
makes me
Rocher.
think Ferrero Rocher. You know.
What does that mean?
Didn't bring any with me. Sorry, disappoint you. No, I'm very, very lucky and I feel very honoured that BAFTA have asked me to somehow represent them in this capacity. And really, it's about something I care very much about, which I now go back to do. I work with RADA as well in a similar way. Both charities, which I think is less well known, and it's about equality of opportunity and representation. And BAFTA have been extraordinary in trying to keep the doors open for everyone so that a career in the arts, whatever it is you're doing, whether you're making films, making television, games, designing games, you're a storyboard artist, you're a scenic painter, you're a carpenter, you're a whatever your job is, stage manager, actor, director, screenwriter, that you feel, that we all feel, that we are represented in our creative industries. And it's a cause I feel very strongly about, that who you are and where you're from should not be a barrier to what you have to give. Because otherwise our whole society will be immeasurably impoverished. So we just, and so that's what this is tonight. And so huge thanks to BAFTA for asking me to speak on their behalf. Yeah.
I think they did a thing when we were in pre-production for Mary Queen of Scots where they changed the eligibility for BAFTA awards, which meant that if there wasn't proper representation within the film, that you were not eligible. And, you know, it made a tremendous difference. Like, people in the pre-production period really noticed that.
Yeah.
Now, you don't want to have to compel people to do it, but at the same time, that's a serious and a proper move.
Yeah, well, I just think that, you know, our culture is so rich and deep and broad and diverse, and we need to hear voices from every quarter.
Yeah.
There are as many stories as there are people on this planet. And that's what the arts are, is we're all just telling stories to each other to understand each other. And so we need to hear from everyone and to make sure, those of us who are lucky enough, that there are no doors which are closed, that it doesn't matter what life you've had, that there's a place for your story.
When I went to see your Hamlet, in which Lolita Chakrabarti played
Gertrude.
And Lolita is married to Adrian Lester, who is in Mary Queen of Scots, playing the English ambassador to Scotland. And Lolita told me this, and actually Adrian did not say this to me until a couple of weeks ago, that Adrian Lester, who was Peter Brook's Hamlet, and, you know, an amazing Rosaline, actually, for Declan, who you were in As You Like It years ago, and that great Othello, had never played in a period drama on screen. Like, that extraordinary career, and he's never been in a costume drama.
No.
I mean, you know, it's completely nuts, so it's great work. Okay.
By the way, that's why Hamlet was not seen by that many people. So we did the production to raise money for RADA for the same reason. But you never know.
Never know. There you go. You heard it here. Shall we see if there are some questions and you've not been completely exhausted by goodness?
Hope we've made some sense.
Mercy me.
Who's picking?
Hello. Do you want to pick or shall I pick?
You pick.
Okay, you pick. There is... Okay, so there's a lady there in a nice gold top in between these two ladies with their hands up. Yes? You're going to stand? That's good. We encourage that.
We have
microphones. Oh, there's a microphone.
Hi, Tom. Good evening. First of all, I would like to thank for the opportunity to come here. And second of all, I want to ask you, because I've read The Night Manager from John le Carré.
Yeah.
And I've seen the series as well. And I have to say that I really liked... I thought that it was a shame because the Sophie character in the book was so much like... It was a more three-dimensional character than it was portrayed on the series. So I was just wondering, for yourself as an actor, I don't know if you read the book or not.
Yes, I did.
So, I don't know.
You know that prep thing we were talking about? Like, takes that really seriously. Okay, that'd be like a pep airplane with one wing. So.
My bad.
I used to sometimes read the book to the crew.
All right.
They didn't appreciate it. Okay. They're like, come on, Tom, we've got to get this done before the sun goes down. Story time later.
No, so I just wanted to ask you, don't you think that it was a shame that the character, Sophie character, wasn't that well developed on the series? Because I think, like, at least from myself, as a viewer of the series, I thought that at the series, it felt like she was more of a fling to Jonathan. Rather in the book, it felt like he was very much in love with her, so it makes sense, like that kind of feeling he had towards Roper. So I was just wondering what was your opinion on that?
I feel very much the same as you do in the respect that I do think Jonathan Pine was in love with Sophie. And I think the loss of Sophie is very traumatic for him. You know, it's in a way, if you felt it wasn't properly honoured in the adaptation, the fault is ours. But we had the tricky thing with adapting a novel to screen is that there's with any novel a great deal of interiority is permitted by the author to the reader. Le Carré invites the reader inside Jonathan Pine's heart and mind, and we had a very clear time structure. And I think Sophie is she's in a way the leading character of episode 1. But at the same time, you need to meet Richard Roper. But I tried to convey that. There's a scene where Jonathan Pine comes across Sophie's dead body, and he has a breakdown. It's very traumatic for him. And through that I was trying to convey the depth of his loss. And then it's also something, if you look again, that Olivia Colman's character touches on. She keeps mentioning Sophie to remind Pine of a reason for his commitment. Okay.
Thank you. Okay, so there's a lady in a stripy top in the corner there. That's great. Thank you.
Hello, this is a question for both of you about Coriolanus. And it seems to me that the mother has an awful lot to answer for. She's really not great. She's a real Philip Larkin kind of mum. And I'd just like your views about playing...
About my mother.
Not at all. I wouldn't ask. But it just came across so well in the playing of Volumnia and that relationship and just what it was like actually doing that on stage.
First thing to say is I was just the luckiest man in the world to have Deborah Finlay play that part. She is just the kindest woman with a really genuine depth of range within her as an actress. And we talked a lot about it. I think one of the flaws of the character of Marcius Coriolanus is that he has not developed, for whatever reason, the flexibility and it's a fault of his mind. It's a mental failing, a failure of emotional intelligence to yield. That his mother he's taken his cue from nurture, as it were. There's a singular couplet I can remember in that central scene in Act 3, I think it is, where he retaliates to her and says, "Would you have me false to my nature? Rather say I play the man I am." And my interpretation was that Marcius is doing everything she told him to do. She brought him up to have no fear of death. She brought him up to be enormously courageous, fearless, dedicated, committed, this war machine. And suddenly she's saying, well, now what you have to do is, to be a politician, you have to do things you don't like and you have to say things you don't mean. And his response is, that goes against everything you've taught me. Yeah. That goes against my integrity, my honor. And she says, well, times change and things change. And it's his failure of flexibility in a way. It's his obstinacy. There's something quite childlike about that obstinacy. And they never fully get over that until the final scene, where her plea and her entreaty to beg him not to sack the city of Rome is what makes him yield. Menenius, in our production play by Mark Gatiss, says he has changed from man to dragon. And this dragon weeps. Sir, it is no little thing to make mine eyes to sweat compassion. The tragedy of Coriolanus is enshrined because this man who has never displayed any vulnerability, in that moment learns how to be vulnerable. And for that, he is executed.
Yeah, I think that's a beautiful, beautiful answer. And I mean, I think that I've just got a great flashback to that scene then, which anybody can watch on NT Live for side plates, which is that reduction. So she pivots, which is something she's not meant to do as this great Roman mother. And then actually the last thing she says is, I'm done with you. Like, I'm not, almost like, when toddlers are absolutely losing it, and the last thing, like your last resort is to go, I'm not looking at you.
Yes.
It has that kind of quality to it. Yeah. I think it's an amazing piece of writing. And I think that, it is a play about rage, and there's not a lot of love in any romantic sense within the play, but what there is this extraordinary, for me, portrait of unanswerable need. Like they have an unanswerable, I don't mean an incestuous way, but they have an unanswerable need for each other as two people that they've never spoken about, really, in any detail.
He wants to make her proud.
Yeah.
And he goes about it in the wrong way.
Yeah.
But I think we all want to make our parents proud.
Certainly do. Okay.
Let's... The back? Should we go to the back?
Go to the back? Who's up at the back? Yes, that's fair. There's a gentleman up at the back there. Yep, up at the back on the right. Great.
I was just interested what it was like to film at La Fortaleza, which was one of the locations.
Yes, in Mallorca.
It's a slightly loaded question, by the way.
Why is it a loaded question?
Well, I just had my 40th birthday party there.
It's a question about a place called La Fortaleza in Mallorca, which was the location for Roper's palatial lair in The Night Manager. It's an amazing spot. I've just told a funny story. If I tell the same story.
No, tell the story. It's a great story.
I was doing my homework the day before, and we had been filming in other parts of Mallorca. Because principally we had been filming in Morocco, and then the last 3 weeks of the shoot were in Mallorca. But it was already June, so it was very hot. And I just remember it being incredibly hot up on that hill. And on the Sunday, I wanted to see where this location was. And it's across the bay from, this is just a geography lesson now, it's across the bay from Pollença. And it was a Sunday afternoon, and there were families on the beach, people eating ice cream, going for walks, windsurfing. And I caught this guy at the end of giving a windsurfing lesson, and I said in my broken Spanish, do you happen to know where La Fortaleza is? And he did a sort of extraordinary movie double take. He sort of did this, he went, La Fortaleza. La Fortaleza. ¿Conoces? And I said, well, you know where it is. And he again, the drama of it was so great. Because he was in a wetsuit and a windsurfer, looking so macho. And he sort of swept his wet hair back and pointed Ahí, la fortaleza. And I said, wow, it looks very impressive, and it sort of came into focus through the trees. And I said, have you been to La Fortaleza? No. No para mí. Anyway, it's a ridiculous story. It's the excuse for me to be dramatic, but
No, it's absolutely blissful.
But and it was great, and it's an amazing location for that part of the story. And I just remember my memory of it is constantly running around, because that's when Pine does a lot of his spy work, and trying to find the right staircases and locations to do those bits under the summer sun. Not too shabby.
That was probably the best answer you could have anticipated. So let's go back again. So there's I think the mic's still up there. There's a lady in a white shirt toward the centre there, at the back.
Hello. Just want to say I genuinely can't wait for American Scott. Thank you so much.
Thank you. You might be a bit Scottish. Is that?
I am, yeah.
Yeah, or a lot Scottish. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So I can't wait. Thank you. My question was for Tom. When you're playing a character, it's a really actory kind of question. I do apologise. When you're creating a character, do you find the voice first, or do you find the body, like the physical body, and do you apply them both? Like how do you? Basically, I'm struggling to find a physical body of a character. So, do you use animals? Do you use lab and effort? How is it that you?
I have done. That's worth saying.
And can you explain what animals and Laban are to the group?
Yes. So yes, I did animal study at RADA, where it's an exercise in trying to use your body to express some essence. That if as you might be, but if as an actor you're a bit stuck about a character, you can think, well, what kind of animal is this person?
What was your animal at RADA? Because you pick one, don't you?
I wanted to be a giraffe.
Uh-huh.
But I was not allowed to be a giraffe because the movement director said, but Tom, you already are a giraffe.
Rob Hasty, who I was speaking of, was an otter.
Yeah.
I used to come downstairs. We shared a flat of like a Tuesday morning and find him just in his pants in front of an otter video.
Yeah, no, there's. I was in the same year as Andrea Riseborough, and she did a hyena. It was unforgettable. I can see it even now. It was literally like a hyena was in the room. I don't know why I did this. I was at the London Zoo trying to find inspiration, and I decided I was going to be a black mamba snake. Incredibly difficult invertebrate.
Pick something with legs.
Yeah, but it weirdly became about the scent, the tongue. That the tongue is a sort of thing that he's trying to. It's like almost like a kind of like a lust or an appetite that's expressed by the snake's tongue. I'd never applied it, I don't think, in any character. But and Laban is a language and a vocabulary and a methodology about finding a way into a fictional human being, just using verbs, active verbs, floating, gliding. Do people glide down the street, or do they stomp, or do they have a stomp with an inner float, or do they have a? This is a way of trying to give physical life to somebody else that is not you. To really answer your question, I think I try. It's something. It's neither. It's not quite so deconstructed, I suppose, for me. But it's something about the soul of the human, and if I study the soul in some way, and where I connect to that character at a deep level, it will reveal how they move and how they speak. I knew, as Coriolanus, that this was a decorated Roman warrior, a soldier and a warrior, somebody whose body was hardened by the practice of warfare. And so I did a lot of extra physical work just to give myself that sense of feeling fitter, feeling stronger, feeling more like I could climb that ladder, or do a backflip over Hadley. It was about sort of about a kind of muscularity that character needed. The character, it's always in the words. Character was constantly talking about his body, talking about the blood he shed, talking about the scars he bore, and this is someone who's clearly a very physical person. I'm trying to think of other characters, I suppose. The elegance of the elegance of Jonathan Pine was something from the novel that this night manager had this perfectly inoffensive exterior, that he was gentle enough that he could recede into a wall, and that if he needed to come out and pacify, if the wedding was still going on in the ballroom, but he needed to pacify the guests in the first floor who were complaining about the music, keep both people happy, that everything was easy, everything was loose, everything was graceful. There was no stress, no worry, no. So there was a buried tension that didn't manifest in the body.
And you said you're having a problem finding a character.
I'm struggling to find the body of the character so much.
Who's the character?
Heavenly in Tennessee Williams' Sweet Word of You.
Yeah, no, that is hard.
Yeah. Never played Heavenly. I suppose it'll be there somewhere. Go back to the play and see if you can find something in it that you can connect to at a very personal. No one has to know what the personal thing is that you connect to, and then see how that informs just the way you walk, the way you enter the space.
I also think there's a lot of. Have you ever done a Williams play?
Not for a long time. I did one when I was at Cambridge. I did A Streetcar Named Desire.
Yeah. Stella.
Stella.
And
Yeah.
I think it's one of those plays. It's a bit like, that's what's so great about Ivanov. It's a bit like a Chekhov play. People think there's a way to do it in their body. Do you know what I mean? There's sort of tropes around the acting of it. Yeah, that can be really, really unhelpful. Because you go, okay, it's a Tennessee Williams play, therefore everything I do needs a kind of languor or a kind of drawl, or I'm drunk, or it's hot, or it's, so a bit like bad Chekhov is when people are choosing what I would call too many points of concentration. I'm going to think too hard about Moscow or the Samovar or anything like that. In a way, I think what Tom's saying is something small.
Yeah, and it might be a previous circumstance. I remember very clearly, and I was in a production of Othello at the Donmar in 2007, directed by Michael Grandage. And I played Cassio, Michael Cassio, who's promoted to lieutenant, and Iago is marginalized. Here begins the drama. The first scene of that play is Iago and Roderigo. And then at some point, and then it's Brabantio is woken up. But at some point, Cassio comes in, and he's been looking all night for Othello, that he comes in with news, and he's clearly been awake and active for a long time, rushing around Venice, trying to find people and get them together. And I remember backstage at the Donmar, during the first scene of the play, running up and down the fire escape stairs, because I wanted to come in a bit out of breath. Because I thought Cassio is so desperate to find where everybody is, he can't find anyone. And he comes in and he's a bit like, thank God you're all here, I've got some news. And it was a springboard. That's a fold of the paper aeroplane for me. And I didn't want to have to pretend to be out of breath. I wanted to actually be out of breath. So that I had this...
I had a very, very drama centre, if you know what I mean, sort of method-based actor do that in a play once. It was in a war drama. And he came on and he did what you did, which is those 3 breaths. And everyone was waiting for the news. And then he did a 4th. So it was... And everybody on stage laughed because they knew that he'd run around so much that he actually was so out of breath, he wasn't going to be able to get the line out. And 12 actors were just rolling around.
But then the fun thing about it for me was actually not worrying about the breathlessness, because I genuinely was out of breath and it was just trying to get the words out. And again...
No, you're good. This was a tour, so that we were in a different theatre and you just miscalculated how much fire escape. He was trying to
goes back to the truthfulness in imaginary circumstances to some extent. Good
Okay,
luck. You'll get there.
Let's take just a couple more. I think we've probably got time for it. So,
How long do we have? Can we, Martha,
one or two more. Very good.
can we round it up to 3?
Let's go 3. We'll try and quicker. Okay, so there's a lady on the end of the row here in a blue shirt. Let's do that.
Hi to you both. I just wanted to ask, because I study acting, so I just wanted to know, because I'm very interested to know about basically how actors and directors are when it comes to certain practitioners. So I was just wondering, like, what do you feel in your careers that certain practitioners have had some sort of influence on you? So I just wanted to know how, and just any advice on who to do research on in the future.
So practitioners to read their stuff or influence you, or
Just to influence probably anyone, and yeah.
Can I ask you, thinking people who are contemporary practitioners now, or really traditional in the canon of the craft of acting training?
More traditional.
Yeah. I mean, I think they're all worth studying because they all have something to give. Stannis, sort of true Brechtian acting is, trying to honour Brecht is very different from trying to honour Stanislavski. Brecht was a very political writer. He didn't, in his writings, it seems, Bertolt Brecht didn't want the audience to feel too much empathy for the characters because the characters were objects in his mind that he wanted to demonstrate something with narratively and politically. Particularly, I don't think he wants you to feel anything for Arturo Ui. He just wants you to watch the sort of chart this man's journey. But then there's other sorts of stuff. There's slightly more. There's less naturalistic things that have come out of the European tradition. I think it's really healthy to study European practitioners, and I remember studying Artaud and his vision.
Can you spell Artaud for the group?
Artaud.
Because that's, if you're going to Google it. That's
There we go. Yeah.
Yeah.
His first name was Antonin. Yeah? And he imagined a different kind of theatrical experience, one that was immersive and sensory. So naturalism isn't the end all be all. It isn't necessarily the thing that you'll always need to draw upon, because sometimes a director might just want to use your body as another piece of a jigsaw puzzle of a great picture that he's trying to make on the stage, and that's when you just submit to you become part of the mechanics of something, and that's always really thrilling when that happens. So I'm trying to think. I think Simon McBurney is a genius. So have a read of Complicité and some of the work they've done. I think clowning is fantastic. I wish I'd done a proper French kind of clowning class, because that's true imagination. I think traditionally you really only have your body as an instrument. There is no set, there are no props. You just have, mime and all that sort of stuff. So,
when I was doing my Lambda exams, I was mainly looking at Stanislavski. So I just kind of wanted to expand my interest and look at further, just to see if there's any more people that could just show me further and give me more of a way to view it, and give me more of like an further interest.
This is really practical, because that's a great list. Just go down the National Theatre bookshop and look at the acting section, and it doesn't matter if you read something that you think is nonsense. At least you will have dismissed it.
Yeah.
I think. And the other thing I would say is that often they get a bit divided, those sections between acting and playwriting. And there's some brilliant books on, 100 Great Plays for Women, or, here's the tradition of modernism in drama and that kind of thing. And actually that can be as exciting and as stimulating and send you on as good a journey as a kind of acting textbook can, I would say. That's helpful?
Yeah.
Go on, you pick a question.
I've gone straight. I've just seen you go. Yeah, there you go. I've just been instinctive about it. Microphone coming.
Hi. So first of all, Tom, I want to thank you so much because you've inspired me to write my first novel, and I'll be forever grateful for that. Thank you so much. And my question is, you've played so many characters over the last couple of years, so I was wondering if any of them, some of them, regardless of how many times you've played them, have made a lasting impact on you as an actor in terms of their character traits, their surroundings, ideals, and morals?
Great question. Immediately, what comes to mind is the big Shakespeare ones, to be honest, because I feel like they've demanded a huge amount from me, and I've had a very fulfilling time playing them. And in a funny way, the great Shakespearean parts, they're all related to each other. And having played some of them, they talk to each other and echo each other in different ways. Sometimes Henry V, something quite Hamletian about him. He's isolated and he feels the weight of his there is no outlet for his solitude or loneliness. And Henry V and Coriolanus talk to each other. They're both war heroes. They both have to do something very dangerous alone. So I would say certainly the Shakespearean characters, and then Loki has had a massive impact on my life. It just, I can't ignore it. He has been quite. I mean, looking at me now, there is no way in hell you'd cast me as that character. This, ginger, Scottish, English guy. I'm playing the Norse god of chaos, and it's a surprise to me as much as it is to anyone else. And the fun I've been able to have with him, and how I've expanded that, or been able to touch on something very ancient. Loki's been around in the collective unconscious for 2,000, 3,000 years. There's something about human beings that they need these characters, these tricksters, to imagine. Dionysus was the Greek equivalent in a way, and Loki is up there, and the mischief in him, this eternal trickster that represents unpredictability and chaos. But our lives as human beings are governed by order and chaos, and we need a little bit of both. And that Loki somehow represents the chaos that sometimes we need. I feel really lucky that I got to play him.
Great. Thank you. Go and pick the last question.
Oh, it's very difficult, this, to pick somebody.
Sorry, everybody.
You have to do it. I can't. I
Yeah,
feel
go.
like
Okay. Oh my goodness.
don't I just feel responsible?
No, very responsible. Okay, I'm just going to pick. There's a lady here in a blue top, just on the second one. Let's just ask.
Hi. From a screenwriting perspective, actors always talk about how they pick parts that not so much resonate, but it's something inside them that says this is part of who they are. Maybe, resonance. So do you pick roles on the basis of the fact that they resonate with you in some way, or is the truth of the role more important and you want to pick something that isn't something familiar to you so that it stretches you? You're known for how much research you do, so something like Robert Lang.
Yes.
I mean, that must be totally different to anybody's life. So do you pick roles that push you, or roles that are more familiar? Do you pick things that actually sort of stretch you because you see them as being something that will stretch you?
I think it's probably both. It's a great question, which is that I try to pick roles which will stretch me, perhaps into territory I might be afraid of, but that within which I can recognize a kernel of familiarity, that there is something in there I can relate to. And the truth, yeah. So with you always try to find that first. I don't think it's I hasten to add, I don't think it's an intellectual exercise. It's a very instinctive thing. Reading something, you find yourself moved by it, excited by it. It makes you laugh. You recognize something in the writing, and then you recognize all the bits that are. You can quite clearly see the bits that are out of your experience. I've never been a soldier. I've played many soldiers. I have played many sons. I am a son. I know what it's like to be a son. So I think it's trying to find the parts of yourself that marry up. You know, with Loki, for example, in the very first Thor film, his emotional pain and his isolation is caused by the trauma of learning that he was adopted. I wasn't adopted. But it was about extending myself into that imagined circumstance of what that might feel like to be told very late that. But in Loki's situation, it's particularly traumatic because he finds out he's the son of his father's mortal sworn enemy. With Robert Lang in High Rise, I could, there's a very interesting detail in Ballard's writing that he moved into the building to get away from grief. And I think in the novel, it's a divorce. He's just recently got divorced. Again, I've never been married, I've never been divorced, but the idea of moving away from pain and actually finding yourself in another very difficult situation. And I thought with High Rise, I found what he was trying to say through that story, which was part of his own experience. If you know anything about Ballard's life, his childhood was very complex, and he was exposed to extraordinary brutality at a very young age. So perhaps he was supposing that behind our civilized manners is something much wilder and less controlled, and that what he does with the inhabitants of that high rise is he pushes them into extremity to test them and see where they end up. And I was excited by that thought experiment, that if the building is a diseased body with Royal at the head, the architect, and Wilder is the sort of guts, and Lang is somewhere in the middle. He's sort of caught between the head and the guts, and he's a physiologist, a doctor, a head doctor, somebody who tries to determine why people's brains don't work. And he can't work out why the brain of this building doesn't work. He just gets subsumed in it. So that's those are two specifics, but there has to be a resonance, I think, with a role. I think so. It's trying to acknowledge that I will have to excavate some part of my own experience and give it shape, that it might become an experience of meaning for the audience. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tom Hiddleston.